All right, everybody, welcome to Political Breakfast from WABE, but not at WABE today. We are here at Manuel's for what we're going to be doing now is a monthly wrap-up. We're here at a very, very historic, political spot, would you call it, Brian and Tharon? Manuel's, where a lot of political action takes place. So it's appropriate that we're here.
Well, it's mainly on the Democrat side. If you go look around, there's a bunch of Democrats on the wall. Of course, Manuel himself was a Democratic CEO or the leader of DeKalb County, whatever they called it back then. So, but I have been coming here for close to 30 years, ever since I was a young journalist at the Journal-Constitution. It was a big journalism hangout too. A bunch of cops come here, but this is just the ultimate Atlanta kind of political spot. It really is.
Well, this is definitely the place that Democrats hang out, and we welcome Republicans. So
everybody's always nice.
Everybody's quite a few Republicans here.
They've come, they penetrated, but as Ryan just mentioned, when he was a journalist, he didn't have to disclose his party affiliation. He was nonpartisan. But what I like about this place more than anything is, yes, the character and the original brick, and they have more parking now. So shout out to Manuel and the nephew and everyone who's running here. But this is also a place where if you're a presidential candidate or gubernatorial candidate coming to town, this is a go-to place. So the shout out for them hosting us today. I come here at least over a dozen times a year, especially during the legislative session. If I kind of want to know what folks are saying kind of in the in-town progressive part of the party, this is a good hangout spot. And the wings have been consistent. So shout out to them being the wings consistent.
And I want to say the second generation owners, Manuel Maloof, I got to work with him on a project last year where we had common goals, even though he's probably a Democrat. And he was just a delight to work with. And so I just greatly appreciate him. I hope I get to meet him in person while I'm here.
He's usually here, and shout out to Brian. I know his cousin Steve Maloof, a good Ansley Golf Club member, and the Maloof family again. Lisa, we can't big name. I mean, they had some challenges here. They've had some renovations and some things, and they really got hit hard during COVID. But this is definitely a blueprint of what you do to stay consistent to your audience and making sure that folks still get good service when they come here.
Yeah, well, they welcomed us and said come anytime. So we're going to take advantage of that invitation and hopefully be here once a month. Before we get talking about politics, we got to talk about sports like we always do. The Falcons. The Falcons. What did the Falcons do yesterday?
Rise up. And I've come to the conclusion that the games that we're supposed to win, we lose. So we're supposed to beat Tampa Bay, which one can make the argument Baker Mayfield is playing lights out right now. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are playing some good football. We go to the Vikings, a team that had a lot of hope, had a new quarterback, rookie quarterback. We won that game. But then we go to Carolina, and we lose that game against a Carolina team who, by the way, got blew out this week. And then we play a really good Washington Commanders team, which, by the way, their quarterback Daniels is out. But we were not going to let Marcus Mariota, who quit on the Falcons, by the way, just like Jeff Duncan, but we'll talk about that later. But he quit on the Falcons, and we were not going to let him come back in and get a win in the Dome and in the Bend. So we appreciate the Falcons for doing good. They go on a bye week and big game against Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills 2 Mondays from now.
That's going to be incredible.
Great game.
Michael Penix was incredible. Bijan Robinson, my cousin Bijan, was fantastic.
Yeah, you said enunciated correctly.
Well, the announcer just had a game where they had a discussion about it. That they talked to his mom, and it's Bijan Robinson. Yeah, and he was a monster. And look, the Falcons, as y'all know, on my list of loyalties, it is there. It is somewhere significantly below the Bulldogs. But I needed a good mouth washing after the Saturday nights, what we saw in Sanford Stadium. That was heartbreaking. I'm so sick of losing to those guys. I just absolutely hate losing to Alabama. And my daughter was there for her first ever night game, so she's going to grow up with that hatred as well. So the futility of playing them is just so enraging when we are clearly the better team, and or should be in today's.
So the Bulldogs teach hate? Is that what?
It's organic. No one taught me this.
It's organic.
It's just this just happened.
Well, our fan base is very nice. I got there early. I tailgated. Shout out to all the many tailgates that I got a chance to do this. But two people I want to mention, Carlos Strong and Terrell Bell, were two outstanding UGA basketball players. And I got invited, even though I didn't play basketball at UGA, to have their first ever tailgate. So my good friend Fred Calhoun, he sponsored that. But then we saw Ant-Man. And
he was there?
Yeah, Ant-Man came back. Yes, he was there, swagged out, dark shades. And for those who don't know Ant-Man, that's Anthony Edwards.
Yeah.
Another big
huge
UGA player.
star.
He pulled up on the sideline with Trae Young. And so we had all the superstars. But let me just say this, and I'm going to take it there. I'm going to tell you what the streets are saying. All right, Kirby's smart. All right, let's just get there. He's now, 2-7 against Alabama.
I think it's 1-7.
Oh, it's 1-7. I'm sorry, 1-7. Okay. Lisa, I knew, because remember last year I went to Tuscaloosa. I told y'all this. I went there. The fans in Alabama, they berate you. They chant. Now here we are. I walk in. We're not saying anything to these Bama fans. All I kept hearing was roll tide, roll tide. And then we started singing this little song. I guess it's our little fight song that I don't really like. I think it's got some racial connotations to it, but it's got some glory stuff in there. But we were just too nice, and those boys who played their hearts out need better coaching. Kirby has got to do something about Mike Bobo. I'm going to say it. All these other fans don't want to say it. We get down there 4th and 1, kick the field goal, tie the game up. Right? But now you put yourself in a bad situation. But before that, a costly targeting call with number 1, who I'm sure is a great young man, diving over the pile.
Another Robinson.
But I watched the entire game, and this is my second one now. I've been there the whole time. It's something when we get to the 4th quarter where Georgia just finds a way to lose against Bama. And I think it comes down to preparation. It comes because we got the talent. And Gunnar Stockton, he had an okay game, had a big drop by number 11. So we got to do better at UGA. But Kirby, not saying it's all his fault, but Mike Bobo, who everybody's talking about privately, if he doesn't get it together, you're going to see, I think Kirby's going to have to let him go because I know they have this loyalty with each other. But if we don't make the SEC championship and make the playoffs, I think you can blame a lot on the offense coordinator.
Yeah, I'm a minority dissenting viewpoint on that. That is what people say. It is not Mike Bobo's fault that Alabama marched 95 yards down the field in 90 seconds with 0 timeouts. That is a complete failure of the defense, and that is the issue. Like, without that drive, Georgia wins the game. I agree that you kick the field goal, but that is Kirby's decision, not Mike Bobo's. When you're making that kind of decision about whether you're a kicker, go on 4th down.
All right, well, let's get to some politics. You name dropped him earlier, Jeff Duncan. We're gonna do a wrap of some of the hot stories this past month. Was that one of the hottest with the Jeff Duncan jumping into the governor's race as a Democrat?
It's hot because it's untraditional. It's hot because a lot of us still have a lot of questions that he has not answered yet. It's hot because he believes that even though he quit on the Republican Party, they don't want him back. Brian has heard the feedback that I've heard. Not one Republican, Lisa, has come to me seriously since his announcement and says, man, we really hate that Jeff Duncan left the Republican Party. And, we're, hey, Tharon, man, we really love that guy. Kind of take it easy on him. No one has said, you know what, man, we would love to have him back. So I think he knew, as Brian has been talking about, that there was no lane there for him. So his candidacy, while he is trying, let's be fair, he's gone to, that's what they always do, Lisa, they go to a black place. So he went to a black coffee shop. He went to a black church. He campaigned for Deborah Shigley, which we'll get to that in a minute. He's got some qualified black people on his team, from what I'm hearing, right? So it's going to be a robust debate about why he believes that he has a distinguishing characteristic. And I'm going to say this again. You can go and join the church. We'll welcome you. But that does not mean you start preaching to the congregation next Sunday. And I think that I keep telling him that. And I had a person tell me, they remixed this. They said, Tharon, you need to add, and he can't start singing in the choir on day 1 either. It's a process. You go join the church first, then you sing the choir, and then you maybe get to the pulpit. And so I think he's got to understand that process. But name recognition is definitely helping him out so far.
You both said that. You said that maybe he should have sat out this round and started working with the Democratic Party and, showing, a little more support and making the rounds before he stepped out.
And of course, that's not for me to say. That is for Democrats to decide whether or not he gets over the bar of credibility with them. And I do think that if you're a Democrat who's going to have a generous viewpoint toward Jeff Duncan, this is somebody who sided on the same side as Democrats when it comes to the 2020 election in a way that ended his career in Republican politics. He took a stand from his view on principle and lived with the consequences. And I think there's a certain number of Democrat voters who are going to be appreciative of what he'd done. He was out there for Biden and then for Kamala Harris last year, so he has built up some credentials. I think the visual of him going out there, as Tharon said, and doing door knocking for Deborah Shickley was very important. Like, I'm with you. I'm going to be out there, on the road, doing the door knocks, doing the hard work of this campaigning. That kind of stuff helps. And at this juncture, we know he's got some ability to communicate and to connect with voters. He's telegenic, and he's certainly saying the stuff that you have to say in a Democratic primary. Some of it does raise some issues of credibility. When you go from being hardcore pro-lifer, Christian conservative, who is standing over the shoulder of Brian Kemp and the heartbeat bill signing, to saying, well, I was wrong, I believe in a woman's right to choose. That doesn't come across as authentic, that comes across as opportunistic. Now granted, there is no room in the Democratic coalition for a pro-life Democrat, just as there is no room in the Republican coalition for a pro-choice Republican. So those are not options anymore in the two tribes. So he's doing what he has to do, but can he get over the authenticity issue with Democratic voters in an era where we reward people who say things that are offensive, that are on the edges of what is acceptable, if people see it as authentic? I think it's been a strong point of Marjorie Taylor Greene. You can not like what she says, you can find her offensive. Her voters see it as authentic.
Yeah, I think the thing, Lisa, is that let's go back to our time of talking about Jeff Duncan on his podcast. I want to be very clear. I've worked with the former lieutenant governor, but I remember when he was in the state house. I'm gonna take it back even further. I was a history major at Clark Atlanta University, Brian. This guy voted on some of the most conservative bills that Republicans have ever passed as a House member. Then he goes and runs for lieutenant governor and supports Donald Trump openly, riding in the motorcade with him, the Beast, supporting him. And so over time, he had a transformational moment where he felt like the party, quote unquote, left him. But also, if your reason is I'm running as a Democrat and I'm qualified and that's one of my defining characteristics, and it's because I voted for Kamala Harris and I stood up to Trump, every single person that's running for governor, including Roy, who just announced, has stood up to Donald Trump and is standing up to Donald Trump. And we voted for Kamala Harris, we voted for Barack Obama, we voted for the Clintons, we voted for Jimmy Carter. I mean, it goes back that far. The guy has never done anything that shows, other than him feeling like it was an opportunistic, word that B-Rob used, opportunity for him to run as a Democrat. And I really honestly think it's quite disruptive. And it's very disrespectful for the folks, many of whom, all the candidates that have actually run, who've been putting in their dues. Now, some folks are going to say, we got some young cats out here writing articles. I see it. Oh, Democrats are spending too much time talking about Jeff Duncan. We talk about what we're doing. We are talking about what we've been doing. Medicaid expansion. Jeff has never done anything around that. Jeff never came out when we had people being disenfranchised in the state around voter engagement. He hasn't said anything about rural hospitals and what he can turn to. He hasn't done anything for HBCUs and helping Black and brown people excel, female business owners. I mean, these are all the things that Democrats have been talking about. So I'll say something to these little young guns out here who want to go and take shots and try to defend this Great White Hope. That's a movie that people should lose, striking similarities with what Jeff Duncan is doing and Jack Johnson and that story. But I do think that Democrats, we can't just focus on Jeff. We do have to make sure that we build a winning coalition. And I think that his candidacy and his reasoning for running is very, very disruptive.
Well, first of all, how dare you put me in a position where I have to defend Jeff Duncan, Tharon? I hate that. I hate this because, but seriously, just one slight correction. You mentioned rural hospitals, and one thing that is his most proud moment as a legislator was he did carry that rural hospital tax credit, where you can give money to the Georgia Heart Program and designate that money to a rural hospital that is in distress. So that he has actually led on that issue. So sorry, I had to correct that one thing. And
no, but that was when he's in the House.
That was in the, yes.
Okay, and he was a co-sponsor of it, right? I mean, and people co-sponsor stuff all the time. And Brian, our legislator, that's good. But I'm talking about, what did you do when you had the opportunity as lieutenant governor? I don't remember him insisting that the issue around expanding Medicaid, issue around maternal mortality, the issues around rural hospitals stand up, he didn't champion those issues. He was too busy fighting with Brandon Beach and Burt Jones and Dozal and all these folks who basically had supported Trump, in 2020. But I just think that, that may be fine. He sponsored a bill. But I hope that you give Democrats that same amount of credit too when y'all start hitting whoever the nominee is, and they try to go back to something they did while they were in DeKalb County or Atlanta, and you kind of gloss over it. But I just still don't think that make him a person who I think is trying to jump in front of the line and run his candidacy. But let's see what he's a threat. He's a real deal, and let's see how much money he can raise.
And I think the one thing that he did do as lieutenant governor that I think would appeal to Democrat voters was the House had led on the hate crimes legislation. This was sometime around COVID, and it was stalling out in the Senate, and he did step in there, really dig in on the hate crimes law and get it over the finish line in the Senate. So that is one thing you can point to from his LG race, but from his LT tenure. But Tharon's right. For the most part, his record is not one that helps you in a Democratic primary.
Quickly, before we go on to some other topics on the Republican side, Brad Raffensperger, Secretary of State, jumped in the race. Has he made a splash since jumping in?
I think Brad Raffensperger actually hurt Jeff Duncan. So here's what I'm about to do something. I'm about to actually give Brad a little shot here. Before Brad Raffensperger got in, Jeff Duncan wanted to be that candidate for those disaffected, disenchanted, disillusioned MAGA Republicans, right? Some of whom say, you know what, Trump has gone too far. I actually am looking for an alternative. That was part of Jeff Duncan's strategy. Don't get it twisted, Lisa. He's not trying to get more black people to vote for him. Jeff Duncan thought he could appeal to some of these disaffected Republicans. Out of nowhere, here comes Brad. So Brad is going to make the case that, unlike the folks on the Democratic side, I'm the one that's paid the biggest cost for standing up to Donald Trump. It almost cost me my job. We received death threats. This man tried to get me to break a law 3 times. I was just smart enough to record the 3rd call. And so I think now Brad Raffensperger is going to be appealing to a lot of those disaffected Republicans. But if you had to ask the Burt Jones people, I was with a good friend, Ryan T. I played a little golf with him, B-Rob, and we were there, and he made it very clear what he is, right? He's a big supporter of Burt. But most Republicans I talk to, they feel like it's Burt's game to lose right now, unless Carr and Raffensperger can figure out a way to expand a Republican base of voters who are disaffected by this president.
I do think expanding the primary is going to be important. Having a big primary is going to be important. The more voters that show up, the better for Raffensperger and Carr. I totally agree with that assessment. If it's just the hardcore MAGA folks, it's going to be really impossible to take down Burt Jones. So you got to expand the primary a little bit, and Raffensperger's got some personal funds. So if he's able to spend money and drive some turnout, get some of that coalition to come his way, and some of those folks are going to go Carr's way. The aim is to keep Burt below 50%. Here's the thing. I don't see any scenario in the current field where Burt Jones doesn't finish with a plurality in the primary. I think that's almost a given. And the question then becomes, is it a plurality in the high 40s or a plurality in the low 40s? I'll remind you, Casey Cagle finished with a plurality in 2018. But it was 40%. And I remember Casey's wife that night saying that she felt certain that Casey was going to lose because he was the odds-on favorite, he was the presumptive winner, and when he came down that low, that's always a bad sign for a front runner. And we have a long history in Georgia of whoever finishes second leapfrogging the first and going on. I was a beneficiary of that. Nathan Deal finished second in the primary in 2010, then we went on to win the runoff. Brian Kemp went on to win the runoff. So that's the pathway to beating Burt, is getting him man-to-man in a primary runoff and seeing what happens, because the microscope is really on you at that juncture. There's no skating by, there's no staying on the sidelines. You got to go out there and earn those votes. So, and look, here's the deal. Almost any other state, that Trump endorsement is defining. It ends the race. Georgia has shown that Georgia Republicans will decide on their own.
Now you got Ruwa Roman jumping into the race, first Muslim woman elected to the Georgia legislature. This pool is getting bigger and bigger, isn't it?
I said this about a few months ago. I said, who is not running for governor?
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And this is before, Lisa, folks even started to announce, because it's an open seat.
Stacey Abrams, where are you?
So now you're trying to get me in trouble. Look, and that is the remaining person. So, but let's stay on State Representative Roman for a second. Rural Woman has been an outspoken progressive leader in the legislature, right? I don't know her extremely well, but I want to give her props. I mean, this is a woman who has not been afraid to stand up for what she believes in, whether it's pushing back on Republicans. And as you mentioned, she's the first Muslim woman elected to the legislature. And so she's even times has spoken out against the Democratic caucus to fight for what she believes in. I think her entry into the race is going to be interesting. Let's see where her platform is going to be. I think that she believes that she can bring a different perspective, but you may have one more Democrat, as you just mentioned, Stacey Abrams, who I'm hearing from my sources have not talked to the former minority leader. Let me make it so clear.
Now, Brian, she's not.
Well, I think she also now has got to calculate, what's best for us to have a winning coalition going into November, and who best represents that coalition. And that's the conversation we got to have. We can't fall in love and have this sugar rush. I'm gonna use one of the BK's favorite lines. That's Brian Kemp, not Brian. Right. But a sugar rush about polling. But I do think that she's doing a lot of stuff nationally. But with Roy's entry into the race, the conversation will expand itself, and we'll see who we can elect to be the next person to go on to try to win in November. Candidate quality and electability in November next year is extremely important.
Yeah, this is somebody who went and campaigned in New York City for Mom John. There's a certain lady on the, what Georgia would see as the far left fringes of the Democratic Party, was sort of silenced at this Democratic National Convention last year because she wanted to go and speak about Palestine and the issues happening over there in Gaza. And Democrats knew that was just too much of a lightning rod, and so she had some little protests outside the convention. So I don't think there's a big appetite for what she's selling here in Georgia, even in a Democratic primary. I do think that there are numerous obstacles that she would have to overcome. I just don't see her making a splash here. And if she thinks that this is going to be a platform where she can go and bring eyeballs to the issues in Gaza and Israel, I think she's wrong. There's just not going to be attention in a field this big for something that's not a kitchen table issue when it comes to being governor of Georgia.
Yeah, you got a lot of pro-Israel Democrats out here, yes, like myself. And however, I want to say this as a pro-Israel Democrat. I have so many friends in the Jewish community. It is horrific to still see what's going on over in Gaza. We've got to do everything we can to end this war. When I see innocent kids, being killed and tortured, this is something that's got to end. And I think that how Aurora handles that issue, and I think we know where she is. Brian just articulated where she is. If she really wants to have a chance at winning, if she is not able to talk about that in a way that doesn't offend so many of the Jewish friends that I have that are still thinking about that horrific day on October 7th, and I would just remember watching the film at the Atlanta Jewish Federation, and it still bothers me to see what happened that day, but I am sympathetic. And I'm saying this as a pro-Israel person who's a Democrat, to see these innocent lives that are being killed, the starvation that's going on over there. So we've got to do something to try to bring a war. And the enemy is Hamas. The enemy is Hamas. The enemy is the people who are terrorists who are killing innocent lives.
The assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk still being talked about here at home, here in Georgia. I don't know, what has that done for politics here in Georgia? It affected all of us. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
I think there's been a lot of positives that have come out of a tragedy, as far as you've seen a lot of engagement among young conservatives on college campuses. I was seeing on social media last week that Speaker Burns went to a Turning Point event down in Statesboro at Georgia Southern, and it was a huge crowd of turnout. We saw a lot of folks at the whiteout in Penn State. They're wearing white freedom shirts. That's what Charlie Kirk was wearing when he was killed, was the shirt that just said freedom. And so the question becomes, what is the carryover effect? One of the great tragedies of our numbness to murder and these horrible shootings is that we move on so quick. Like, right. Oh, this is terrible, thoughts and prayers, and we move on, right? And So does this one have some staying power? You're certainly seeing people talk about this much longer than we've seen in the past.
Right.
And does it make a difference in November? We have a statewide election coming up in November with the Public Service Commission. Right. And it's not the sexiest of topics. It's hard to get people to talk about the Public Service Commission. Right. Or get them to engage. Like we've gotten used to spending, $200 million to tell people to go vote. There's not going to be $200 million to be spent between now and November. So, there's going to have to be more organic grassroots efforts to get people to turn out. The Democrats have the advantage of municipal elections in Democrat cities to drive their turnout. So, is this something that becomes a turnout model for Republicans? Like, Charlie Kirk wanted Republicans to get engaged. He wanted young Republicans to get engaged particularly and go out there and fight for Republican victories. Is this a rallying cry for Republicans in a sleepy election to get them to turn out in force? Now, you still got to go tell them there's an election. It's going to take some money to do that. But I think that is what will be potentially the important thing in Georgia, the aftermath of this tragedy.
Lisa, there's so many voices going on in my head right now, and you probably know these voices, right? And so Brian just did a good job of talking about what Republicans are reacting. But let me tell you the different voices that are talking to me about this tragic murder. I want to start by saying that my condolences, again, still go out to the Kirk family. The morning after the assassination, we came on live. Brian and I actually had probably one of the most difficult times that we had to stand in front of I had to stand in front of a 98% white audience, 90% men, white men, and bring a level of civility, but at the same time, don't hide about what just happened. So the first voice, I'm just going to represent the voices on the show. All right, the first voice is that it's still outrage. A lot of people in the Black community, a lot of folks feel that Charlie Kirk said some very nasty, harmful things about Black people, particularly Black women. And they still feel like, they do not like the fact that he was assassinated. They're not promoting that. They're not happy about it, not celebrating it. But they remind me, and this is the voice, that this is still a person who really said some bad things about Black people. He was big on the Second Amendment, said that maybe more people, in this country, we have more deaths for us to have a better appreciation of the Second Amendment. So that's the first voice. Second voice that I hear is more like a Van Jones voice, right? Charlie Kirk reached out to him and said, hey, and this is where the Republicans start shaking their head like, look, he was a really good guy. Okay. And Van has taken some heat for going on national television and saying, no, look, he's all right. Like he reached out to me. But I support Van because we needed to hear that, because had Van not said that, Lisa, oh man, we were still outraged. Because that voice I just described to you, they're outraged. Like, I cannot come on this podcast.
But that was after they had some words.
And that's the point. Yeah. After they were battling, right? And then the third voice that I hear out here, now let's make it a little bit more partisan, is how do we make sure that the hate that still exists in this country, not saying that he promoted hate, I'm not saying that he was the person, but there's still a lot of hate. And we know that the Republicans, based on what we just heard from B-Rob, based on the president and what he said at his funeral, the vice president carrying the casket to the plane, Speaker Burns going to this event, they're using this as a rallying cry to say, guys, we got to go out and stop them. Now, I think I know who the them are, and I think it's anybody who don't support the Republican Party that Brian just talked about. So as Democrats, we got to figure out, how do we remain calm and strong? Let's not allow them to mischaracterize what happened. Do not let them blame that on us, because we know that a lot of killings that have happened in this country, these mass shootings, who they're being committed by. All right, we know the demographics, how they look, what's going on. It's a combination of a lot of different things. So Democrats, we got to push out the message that this is not something that we stand for and what we do, but at the same time, Republicans are using this as an opportunity to try to have a turnout at the polls. And so we got to match that energy with staying focused on jobs, healthcare, education, infrastructure, public safety, responsible gun ownership. Those are 6 things that I laid out in front of that group that day. And I left, and Brian saw it. All these white men, not all of them agreed with me, but overwhelming majority of them came out and say, you know what, I get what you're saying. So people are still trying to figure out how to handle it. I'm probably talking too much about it right now, but I wanted to represent those voices because I still think that we need to promote more love and more unity in this country. And how we respond to this is going to be so important, not just on partisan politics, but when it happens again, what are we going to do as a country to make sure that we can try to decrease those moments? Because there's so much hate right now. There's so much divisiveness on both sides in this country. And I'm doing my best in this podcast to try to represent the voices, because I got criticized, Lisa. You know, you said the people told me you went on the next morning acting like something that happened, even though I did say the man said some, very inappropriate things about certain people. But how do we harness that energy for good is going to be so important going forward.
And we also talked about freedom of speech, and then it led to that Jimmy Kimmel,
And freedom of speech, and like he got cut up. And shout out to Jimmy Kimmel, who handled that very well.
Yeah.
But even I had mixed reactions on that. Like, you can't censure us and tell us what we can't say, but also I understand 90.1 WABE, y'all are on the front lines. You guys have been doing what you could to just keep your funding going. But you also, I want to applaud you all for standing up by allowing us to have our free speech and trusting in us that we're going to talk about it in a way that doesn't intentionally try to offend someone.
Charlie Kirk was a huge free speech guy, right? I do think that honoring that tradition is part of how we honor him. And I don't think that there's a lot of good in going after comedians who say mean things. One thing that
that's
Trump,
what they do.
One thing that Trump said that was accurate was that nobody watches these shows anymore. That's true. The Colbert thing, they lost $40 billion last year on that show. The financial model for these shows doesn't work anymore. Whereas all of America watched Carson, all of America does not watch any of these shows anymore. So why not just let it die a slow death in its own little echo chamber? That's what I would have done. They're in their own little holes, shouting,
boosted the ratings,
talking to a bunch of liberals who aren't persuadables anyway. Even moderate Republicans don't watch those shows because we feel like we're being preached at the whole time. It went from like trying to make us laugh to trying to indoctrinate us, and we've tuned it out. Let's just, let them go do what they want to do.
Yeah, but real quick, the big issue here with the Jimmy Kimmel situation, Lisa, is that yes, for Republicans that have been big proponents of free speech, and yes, Charlie Kirk was a huge proponent of free speech, it's the constitutionality of you allowing yourself to utilize a government agency to censure people. Let's just take it there. When you said that I want to get my chairman of the FCC to go and basically take your license away because you said something, be wrong, this. Republicans may not watch Nightline television, but you're old enough to know. You're older than me. Let's just say we've been on this, this planet now for over 40 years. For the last 4 decades that you and I have been living, what's been a consistent theme? Night show hosts criticize the president, whether it's Democratic president or Republican. This was nothing new about criticizing the president. But what Jimmy Kimmel did is that he actually said something at a time that was totally inappropriate, and his words, not mine, for an audience that was still grieving and going through some times. But the president used his opportunity to weaponize his agency to go threaten this company to take away their license. And now they are still trying to figure out whether that's gonna happen or not. And so I think that the constitutionality of the First Amendment law is what's really being challenged. And we gotta deal with this where employers, if they don't have a policy in place. So one of the things that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet is these folks who were let go at Cobb County school system, they were aware that there was a social media policy, right? That you had to conduct yourself in a certain way in a certain time. So they were warned, but what are these agencies, these companies that are putting people on administrative leave that are saying things and there's really no policy in place? So I think how we move forward and how we enforce the actual law as written is gonna be so important.
Yeah, there's always been social sanction and private sector sanction for speech, and that's perfectly fine. The First Amendment does not protect us from saying things that could get you fired, right? You can get fired, and I think that's fine.
Yeah.
You can have your own standards as any entity for what that should be. A school board can decide that they are elected by the people. They can decide what those standards are, and I'm cool with that.
Well said, both of you.
This has been great. Here at Manuel's, the food smells great.
Yeah, I can't wait to go. I got a burger sitting over there.
Got a burger sitting over there. Thank you for joining us for another edition of Political Breakfast. A new trend here. We're going to be meeting here at Manuel's monthly for our monthly wrap up, and always a pleasure to have you here watching and listening from WABE. So until next time, we'll see you.
Thank you.